The sky above the city of Nova Prime turned dark red, like a warning from the heavens. Commander Reyna stood on the highest wall, her armor dusty and scratched. Her sharp eyes watched the horizon where black clouds were moving fast. But these were no clouds. It was the enemy. It was the Xerac. For years, the Xerac had crushed every human city, one after another. Their weapons were beyond anything humans could create. Their soldiers were bigger, faster, and stronger. Now, only Nova Prime remained, the last human city on Earth. If Nova Prime fell, humanity would disappear forever. Reyna tightened her gloves and stared at the sea of enemies in the distance. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. Her soldiers were scared. She knew it. She could see it in their eyes when they thought she wasn't looking. They had good reason. The Xerac had never lost a battle. Never. Beside her, Lieutenant Max spoke in a low voice. "They are here, Commander. Just like we expected." Reyna nodded slowly. "Hold the line. No one fires until my command," she said. Her voice was strong, even though a cold fear twisted inside her. The walls of Nova Prime were tall, thick, and armed with the last of humanity's weapons. Cannons, lasers, missile launchers. Every piece of technology left had been installed. But deep down, Reyna knew walls would not save them. They needed something more. Behind her, the city was silent. Families were hiding underground. Scientists were making final adjustments to a desperate plan. Soldiers stood ready at their stations. Every person left in Nova Prime had one job: survive. The ground began to shake under Reyna's boots. A low, rumbling sound filled the air. The Xerac army was getting closer. Through her binoculars, Reyna saw them. Thousands of tall, armored creatures, their bodies glowing with strange blue energy. "They look unstoppable," Max whispered. "They always do," Reyna replied. "Until they're not." A small smile touched her lips. She remembered the secret meeting 2 weeks ago. The meeting that gave her a sliver of hope. Scientists had shown her something new, something the Xerac would not expect. But the risk was huge. If it failed, the end would come within minutes. Still, Reyna had agreed, because hope, even a small one, was better than nothing. Suddenly, a loud horn blasted from the enemy side. It was the Xerac war call, a deep, vibrating sound that made even the bravest soldier flinch. The Xerac moved forward, their ranks as perfect as a machine. No fear, no mercy. The first wave hit the outer defenses. Landmines exploded. Energy fields crackled and zapped enemy soldiers. For a moment, it looked like the humans were holding them back. But then the Xerac adapted, like they always did. They changed their formation, found the weak points, and started breaking through. Max turned to Reyna. "We can't stop them with this firepower alone. We need to fall back to Phase 1. Reyna clenched her jaw. She hated retreating. It felt like losing, but this was the plan. She raised her communicator and spoke into it, loud and clear. "All units, fall back to the inner wall. Repeat, fall back to the inner wall. Leave the traps active." Soldiers began moving quickly, pulling back step by step. Behind them, the Xerac advanced faster. The sky turned even darker, filled with smoke and ash. Fires started along the outer wall. The city looked like it was already burning. Reyna stayed at her post until the last moment. She watched the first Xerac soldiers crash through the outer gate, roaring like wild beasts. Then she turned and ran after her people. Inside the command center, she met with her team. Maps of the city blinked on the screens. Red dots, enemy units, filled the map like a spreading infection. "They're moving faster than predicted," a technician said, fear in his voice. Reyna slammed her fist on the table. "Activate Phase 1. Now." Around the city, hidden systems came to life. Powerful energy nets rose from the ground, trapping groups of Xerac soldiers. Magnetic fields disrupted their weapons. Robotic drones swarmed the skies, dropping special charges onto the enemy. For the first time in a long time, the Zerek slowed down. Confusion spread among their ranks. Reyna saw it on the monitors. Small, but real. Max looked at her. It's working. A little. Reyna nodded. It's just the beginning. Outside, the Zerek roared in anger, tearing through the energy nets with brute force. They would not stop. They would not give up. But neither would humanity. Not today. Not without a fight that would shake the stars themselves. Reyna looked up at the red sky, her fists clenched. Come on, you monsters, she whispered. Let's see if you can handle what we've prepared. And with that, the real battle for Earth began. 2 weeks before the final attack, deep under Nova Prime, Commander Reyna sat inside a hidden room. Thick metal walls surrounded her. Only a few trusted people were there. Scientists, engineers, and a few top officers. The air smelled of oil, metal, and something sharp. Hope mixed with fear. At the center of the room stood an old man with white hair and a bent back. His name was Dr. Ilias Vorn, once called the smartest man on Earth. He placed a small silver box on the table in front of Reyna. It looked harmless. It was small enough to fit in her hands. This, he said, is our last chance. Reyna leaned forward, her eyes sharp. What is it? She asked. Dr. Vorn smiled sadly. Not a weapon. Not like a gun or a bomb. It's a trap. A very clever one. Reyna raised an eyebrow. A trap. Against the Zerek. Everyone knew the Zerek were too fast, too strong. Their armor could survive missiles. Their minds could talk across long distances like a hive. No human trap had ever fooled them before. Dr. Vorn nodded. Yes, but we have studied them, watched them. And we found something unexpected. He tapped on the silver box. The Zerek are not perfect. Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They all think together. They act together. But if something breaks their connection, even for a short time, they become confused. Like ants when you smash their trail. Reyna's heart beat faster. You want to break their connection. Dr. Vorn's eyes shone brightly. Yes, we can send a signal, a virus, into their communication network. It will not kill them, but it will blind them. They will not know what to do. They will panic. The room was silent. Every person there knew what this could mean. But how do we deliver it? Reyna asked. Dr. Vorn looked serious. That is the hard part. The Zerek's mind network is protected by a strong energy shield. To break through it, we must get very close. We must let them enter our city. Reyna leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. You're saying we must lose, to win. Dr. Vorn nodded slowly. We must let them think they have won. Only then will they lower their guard. Only then can we strike. The risk was enormous. If they failed, the Zerek would crush them within minutes. No second chances. No backup plan. Reyna looked around the room. She saw fear in their faces, but she also saw something else, determination. She stood up and spoke clearly. We will do it. We have no other choice. Now, 2 weeks later, Reyna stood in the command center of Nova Prime, watching the enemy approach. Everything was happening as planned. The retreat, the traps, the confusion. Max rushed to her side, holding a small device. The silver box, now active and ready. Commander, the virus is loaded. We can launch it as soon as they are inside the core. Reyna took the device carefully. It felt heavier than it looked. Maybe because the weight of all humanity rested inside it. They must get close, she reminded Max. Very close. No early moves. Max nodded, though his hands were shaking. On the giant screens, the Zerek broke through another gate. They were inside the outer city now. Buildings crumbled under their heavy steps. Their roars shook the air. Soldiers fought bravely but pulled back as ordered. Every step was measured. Every movement was part of the trap. Inside her heart, Reyna felt a small voice screaming at her to fight back harder, to launch missiles, to send every drone. But she pushed that voice away. They had to wait. The Zerek had to feel like they had already won. Sweat dripped down Reyna's forehead. She watched the red lights blinking on the screen. More and more Zerek inside the city. "Hold," she whispered. A young soldier near the monitor shouted. "They are reaching the core. The last barrier is falling." Reyna's eyes hardened. She raised the silver box high. Now. She pressed the button. The device sent out a silent pulse, a wave of invisible energy. It shot through the city, through the air, reaching the Zerek's hidden mine network. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Silence. Fear. Then chaos. The Zerek soldiers suddenly stopped. Some stumbled. Others turned around and ran into each other. Roars filled the air, but now they sounded confused, broken, wild. On the screens, the red enemy dots moved in random patterns. Their perfect formation shattered like glass. Max gasped. "It's working. It's really working." Reyna smiled grimly. "They are blind. And now, we strike." She grabbed her helmet and shouted into the comms. "All units, full attack. Take back our city." Outside, the soldiers of Nova Prime charged forward with everything they had. Blasters fired. Drones swarmed. Explosions lit up the dark sky. For the first time in years, the humans were not running. They were fighting back. And the unbeatable enemy had never looked so weak. Smoke filled the air. The ground shook under heavy footsteps. Commander Reyna stood at the front lines, her blaster ready. Around her, soldiers of Nova Prime pushed forward, fighting harder than they ever had before. The virus had worked. The Zerek were blind and confused. For the first time, they were not moving like one perfect machine. They stumbled, roared, and attacked in the wrong directions. Some even crashed into each other. Reyna raised her arm and shouted, "Push forward. Don't let them regroup." The human soldiers charged. Their blasters lit the dark streets. Drones flew overhead, firing small missiles at the enemy. The Zerek fell in large numbers, their strange blue blood staining the ground. But Reyna knew better than to celebrate early. The Zerek were strong even without their perfect coordination. One wrong move, one mistake, and everything could still collapse. Lieutenant Max ran up to her, breathing hard. "Commander, new wave incoming. Bigger units this time." Reyna turned to the large screen behind them, set up on a broken wall. The image showed a new group of Zerek approaching. These were not the normal soldiers. They were larger, stronger, armored with thick plates of dark metal. Reyna's heart sank for a moment, but she stood firm. "They are sending their elites," she said quietly. "They still want our city. They will not stop." Max looked worried. "Our traps won't work on them. They are too smart, too fast." Reyna nodded. "I know. We will have to fight them the hard way." She clicked her communicator and gave the order. "All heavy units to the front. Use armor-piercing rounds. Target the big ones first." Across Nova Prime, tanks rolled into position. Heavy blasters charged up. Rockets locked onto the larger Zerek. The two forces crashed together like two storms. The noise was deafening. Blasts, roars, and the sound of metal breaking metal. Reyna fought in the front line, shooting her blaster with deadly aim. Her soldiers followed her example. They fought not for medals or glory, but for survival. One of the elite Zerek spotted Reyna. It was huge, twice her height, with glowing red eyes. It roared and charged straight at her, smashing aside anything in its path. Max shouted, "Commander, watch out." But Reyna stood her ground. She waited until the creature was close, then rolled to the side. The Zerek crashed into a concrete wall, sending dust and debris flying. Reyna jumped to her feet and fired 3 shots into the creature's weak spot, a small gap between its armor plates. The creature roared in pain and fell to the ground, thrashing wildly. Reyna breathed hard but kept moving. She had no time to rest. Behind her, more Xeric elites broke through the smoke. One grabbed a human soldier and threw him like a rag doll. Another smashed a tank with its heavy fists. Reyna shouted into her comms, "Focus fire on the big ones. Bring them down, or we all fall." Soldiers grouped together, firing in teams. Tank cannons blasted the larger Xeric apart. Step by bloody step, they pushed back the new wave. Still, Reyna knew something was wrong. She could feel it, a cold knot in her stomach. This attack was different. Too fast. Too strong. "This isn't their final move," she whispered. Max heard her. "What do you mean? We're winning, aren't we?" Reyna shook her head. "The Xeric don't fight like this. Not unless they are hiding something bigger." As if to answer her, the ground trembled again. But this time, it was worse. Cracks split the streets. Buildings swayed. On the horizon, through the smoke, Reyna saw a massive shadow moving. Taller than any Xeric soldier. Heavier. Darker. Her blood ran cold. "It's him," she said. "The Xeric leader." Max followed her gaze and gasped. "He's coming here. Himself." Reyna nodded slowly. They know. They know they are losing. So now their strongest will come to finish it himself. The soldiers around her, tired and bleeding, looked up at the approaching monster. Fear spread like wildfire. Some took a step back. Reyna couldn't let that happen. She raised her blaster high and shouted, her voice full of iron. "Stand your ground. This is our home. We fight here. We fight now." The soldiers roared back, their courage lighting up the dark night. But Reyna knew the real battle had not even started yet. The ground shook under Reyna's feet as the massive shadow loomed closer. The Xeric leader towered over the battlefield, his armored form like a walking mountain. His eyes burned with anger, glowing red, and filled with hatred. Reyna stood tall, her weapon ready. Beside her, Max and the other soldiers tightened their grips on their blasters, but even they couldn't hide the fear in their eyes. "This is it," Max said, his voice shaky. "He's coming straight for us." Reyna didn't flinch. She had faced monsters before, real ones. But this was different. This was the heart of the enemy, the leader who had crushed humanity's cities one by one. The ground cracked as the Xeric leader stomped forward. His roar was like thunder, shaking the air around them. The humans held their ground, though it seemed impossible. "Form up," Reyna shouted. "Don't break the line." The soldiers quickly grouped together, forming a wall of firepower. The tanks behind them rumbled into position, their heavy cannons aimed at the approaching enemy. But Reyna knew this wouldn't be enough. The Xeric leader was too powerful, too fast. No matter how many shots they fired, his armor would hold. The only way to defeat him was to outsmart him. "Max," she said, her voice steady, "start the countdown." Max's eyes widened. "Commander, are you sure? This is risky." Reyna's gaze never left the giant warrior approaching them. "I'm sure. We have no choice. It's now or never." Max swallowed hard and nodded. "Understood." In the heart of Nova Prime, deep underground, the countdown had already begun. A team of engineers worked quickly, adjusting the power levels of the hidden device. They had no time to waste. The device was simple but deadly. Hidden beneath the streets of the city, it had been designed to activate at the right moment. Its power was enormous. It could take down the Xeric leader, or it could take down the entire city. Up on the surface, Reyna watched as the Xeric leader stomped closer. Every step felt like the end. The ground trembled beneath her, but she stood her ground. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. "He's almost here," Max said, looking nervously at the massive form moving closer. Reyna's voice was calm. "Hold your fire. Wait for my signal." The Xeric leader stopped just outside their line, his glowing eyes narrowing. His massive weapon, A huge energy blade swung to his side. He raised his hand, and instantly the human soldiers were thrown back by an invisible force. They screamed as they hit the ground, disoriented and wounded. Reyna stumbled but stayed on her feet. The blast of energy from the Zarek leader was powerful, but she had expected it. She pressed a button on her wrist communicator, sending a signal to the engineers below. "Now," she whispered. The ground beneath the Zarek leader suddenly hummed with energy. A massive surge of power shot upward, and the hidden device activated. The Zarek leader froze. His eyes flashed with confusion as the ground beneath him began to crack and shift. The streets of Nova Prime seemed to come alive, turning into a trap designed just for him. "Take him down," Reyna shouted. The soldiers, already back on their feet, opened fire. Tank cannons blasted the Zarek leader with everything they had. Laser beams hit him from all directions. But his armor was too strong. The bullets bounced off. The energy blasts barely scratched the surface. For a moment, it looked like the humans were doomed. Then, the trap took full effect. The ground cracked open beneath the Zarek leader's feet, and powerful energy beams shot up, encasing him in a glowing net. The air hummed with electricity. The leader's massive form struggled, but the energy net held him fast, like a bug trapped in a web. Reyna's heart pounded in her chest. "It's working," she yelled. "Keep firing." The humans didn't hesitate. They aimed at the weak points in the Zarek leader's armor and fired with everything they had. This time, the shots didn't bounce off. The armor began to crack. The leader's roars grew louder, but he couldn't escape. With one final blast, a tank fired its last missile straight into the Zarek leader's chest. The explosion was deafening. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, the massive figure of the Zarek leader fell to the ground with a crash, his armor cracked open and smoking. The energy net slowly faded, leaving nothing but a broken enemy. Reyna's breathing slowed. Her chest heaved as she stared at the fallen leader. It was over. Did we win?" Max asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Reyna's face was grim. "For now, but we've only just begun." The victory felt hollow. The Zarek were not finished. The leader was down, but they were still out there, lurking in the shadows. Reyna knew that the real war had only just begun. The fight for Earth, for humanity's survival, was far from over. But for the first time in years, they had hope. Reyna looked around at her soldiers, their faces tired but filled with pride. "We've shown them we are not finished, but this is just the beginning. We must finish what we started." And so the humans of Nova Prime stood ready. The battle for their home was far from over, but now they had a real chance to win. The battle had not ended. The Zarek leader was down, but the enemy was far from broken. They were still out there, angry, vengeful, and ready to fight until the last breath. But for the first time in weeks, humanity had a small spark of hope. The Zarek had lost their greatest warrior, and their perfect coordination was in chaos. Commander Reyna stood at the front lines, looking at the horizon. The night sky was darker than usual, filled with smoke and fire. She could hear the hum of distant weapons, the roar of soldiers, and the crackling of flames. It was a battlefield, but it was their battlefield. Max stood beside her, his face tense, his eyes focused on the chaos unfolding around them. "They're regrouping," he said, his voice low. "They'll attack again. Stronger this time." Reyna nodded. She knew the Zarek well. They wouldn't just give up. They would come back, smarter, faster, more determined. "We're ready," she said, though her voice betrayed none of the fear that was rising in her chest. A voice crackled over her communicator. It was from Lieutenant Serrano, one of the officers holding a perimeter on the eastern side of the city. "Commander, we've spotted more Zarek forces coming from the south. They're massing for another attack." Reyna clenched her fists. "Hold your position," she ordered. "We're coming to reinforce." She turned to Max. Get the tanks in position. We need to set up a second line of defense, now. Max nodded and sprinted off. Reyna's eyes swept across the battlefield once more. The city was a mess. Rubble, smoke, and destruction. But there was still life here. People were still fighting. She couldn't let that go to waste. At the southern edge of Nova Prime, the Xerac had indeed regrouped. They had learned from their mistakes. They had adapted. Xerac drones flew overhead, scanning for any weaknesses. Their large war machines stomped across the land, their glowing eyes searching for any sign of human life. The silence was unsettling, the calm before the storm. Then, the Xerac moved. They came in waves. First, the small scout units, then the larger warriors, and finally, the massive warships that hovered above the city, casting dark shadows over the burning streets. Reyna watched from the command center, her eyes hard and unblinking. The Xerac were clever, but so were humans. This time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. "Deploy everything," she ordered. "Now." Max's voice came through her communicator. "Commander, we've got the heavy units ready. Tanks, drones, and bombers are in position." Reyna's hand tightened around her weapon. "Good. This is it. We either win this fight, or we die trying." The battle exploded into chaos. The Xerac attacked with all their might. Their war machines roared through the streets, firing devastating energy blasts at anything that moved. Human soldiers fought with every ounce of strength they had, but the Xerac were relentless. Reyna stood at the front, firing her blaster and giving orders. Her team was moving quickly, setting traps and launching counterattacks. Tanks fired missiles, drones swarmed the skies, and artillery pounded the Xerac forces from every angle. But no matter what they did, the Xerac kept coming. Reyna watched as one of the larger Xerac machines stomped toward them. It fired a massive energy beam that tore through the side of a building, causing it to collapse. The shockwave knocked Reyna off her feet, but she quickly recovered. "Focus fire on that machine," she shouted. Soldiers and tanks turned their weapons toward the enemy. Laser beams and missiles hit the machine in unison. The Xerac responded with a deadly blast of energy, but the humans were faster. Another missile hit, followed by a burst of blaster fire. The machine staggered, then fell, crashing into the ground with a deafening boom. Reyna felt a surge of hope. This was it. They were winning. But then, something changed. Above them, the skies darkened. The ground rumbled. The last wave of Xerac reinforcements had arrived. Massive warships descended from the sky, blocking out the stars. Reyna's eyes widened as she saw the ships. They're launching everything they have. The warships opened fire, unleashing massive energy blasts that tore through the city. Buildings exploded, and the ground cracked under the force of the blasts. Reyna's heart sank. This was too much. The city couldn't take it. They needed a final push. "Max," she yelled into the comms. "We need everything we have left. Launch the final attack." Max's voice crackled through. "Commander, we're out of missiles. The bombers are reloading, but it'll take too long." Reyna cursed under her breath. They didn't have time. Then something clicked. Her mind raced, and she made a decision. "All units, fall back to the central core," she ordered. "We'll make our stand there. Hold the line at all costs." The soldiers began to retreat, pulling back toward the heart of the city. Tanks, drones, and soldiers regrouped, fighting off the Xerac as they retreated. Reyna and Max stayed at the front, keeping the pressure on the enemy. The warships hovered above them, their weapons ready to fire. Reyna raised her fist. "This is our last chance. We'll hold the line. Together." The final battle was upon them. With nowhere else to go, the humans of Nova Prime were ready to fight to the death. But for the first time, Reyna felt that old spark of hope. The Xerac had come to crush them, but now it was clear they had underestimated humanity. As the enemy advanced, Reyna prepared herself for the fight of her life. She knew that the future of Earth rested on this moment. and she was ready to make it count. The ground trembled beneath Commander Reyna's boots as she led her soldiers through the ruins of Nova Prime. The Zarek were relentless. The warships above were still firing, and the air was thick with smoke and the sound of distant explosions. It felt like the end. The city was crumbling around them. Buildings that had stood for centuries were now just piles of rubble. The sky was a deep, angry red, painted by the fires of war. But Reyna wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Her soldiers, weary and bloodied, followed her every step. They had fought hard, pushed beyond their limits, but they couldn't hold back the Zarek forever. They needed a plan. They needed one last chance to turn the tide. Reyna's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for something, anything that could give them the edge. The Zarek warships hovered just above them, their massive cannons aimed at the city. The last remaining human forces were in retreat, falling back to the central core of Nova Prime. But it wasn't enough. The Zarek were everywhere. Their numbers were too great, and their power was overwhelming. Max ran up beside her, his face covered in dirt and sweat. "We're running out of time, Commander. They're closing in. The warships are preparing for another attack." Reyna clenched her jaw. "I know. We have one shot left." Max looked at her in confusion. "What are you talking about? We don't have any more missiles, no more bombs. We're out of options." Reyna turned to him, her face grim but determined. "There is one last weapon. We've been keeping it hidden for months. A weapon so powerful it can take down an entire Zarek fleet in one blow." Max's eyes widened. "Are you sure? We've only tested it once. It could destroy everything." Reyna nodded. "I know, but we don't have a choice. It's either this or we lose everything." She activated her communicator, sending a signal to the hidden bunker beneath the city. "Bring it up," Reyna ordered. Now, deep beneath Nova Prime, engineers and scientists scrambled to activate the hidden weapon. It was a massive energy cannon, buried beneath the earth, capable of unleashing an attack powerful enough to destroy the Zarek warships in one shot. But it was also dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. If it didn't work, the entire city could be wiped out. On the surface, Reyna watched as the last remnants of humanity began to gather around the central core. The tanks were rolling into position. Soldiers were regrouping. But the Zarek were closing in, faster than ever. Max stood beside her, his face tense. "Are you sure this will work?" Reyna didn't answer at first. Her eyes were locked on the warships above, their energy cannons charging. It was now or never. "We don't have a choice," she said quietly. "We do it, or we die here." The distant roar of the Zarek forces grew louder. The ground shook again as the first energy blast from the warships slammed into the city. It tore through several blocks, leaving nothing but rubble in its wake. Reyna's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. Finally, the signal came. The massive energy cannon beneath the city was ready. "Max, get to the control center," Reyna ordered. "Activate the cannon. Now." Max nodded and ran toward the bunker. Reyna followed closely behind, her pulse racing. The countdown had begun. Inside the bunker, technicians scrambled to input the final codes. The massive cannon hummed with power, a deep vibration that filled the air. The engineers had worked tirelessly for months to prepare it. And now, its time had come. 10 seconds, one of the engineers shouted. "Ready, Commander." Reyna stood at the control console, watching as the countdown continued. Every second felt like a lifetime. 5 seconds. Max stood beside her, his eyes wide with fear and hope. 3 seconds. The massive cannon aimed skyward, its barrel glowing with intense energy. It was their last hope, the only thing that could take down the Zarek warships. "Now," Reyna shouted. The cannon fired. The blast was like nothing anyone had ever seen. A blinding light shot from the cannon, cutting through the dark sky like a spear of pure energy. The blast struck the Xeric warships with a deafening explosion, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the warships began to fall. One by one, the massive ships crashed to the ground, their engines exploding in bright bursts of fire. The sky lit up with the destruction, and the ground trembled with the force of the impact. Reyna watched in awe as the last of the Xeric forces fell from the sky. It was over. But as the dust settled, Reyna's victory was bittersweet. The city was still in ruins. The cost of the battle had been high, and many had fallen. But they had done it. They had taken down the Xeric. Reyna stood tall, looking at the burning wreckage of the warships. The fight was over. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe. "We did it," Max said, his voice shaking. Reyna nodded, her face somber. "For now, but we must rebuild. We must make sure the Xeric never return." She looked out over the destroyed city, knowing that this victory, though hard-earned, was just the beginning of humanity's long road to recovery, and she would be there to lead them. The battle had ended. The once proud city of Nova Prime now lay in ruins, a testament to the price humanity had paid for survival. Smoke billowed from the crumbled buildings, and the echoes of explosions still lingered in the air. But for the first time in days, the silence felt different. It wasn't the quiet before the storm, but the calm that followed after victory. Commander Reyna stood at the edge of the destroyed city, her eyes scanning the horizon. The warships that had once blocked out the sun now lay in smoldering wreckage. The Xeric had been defeated, but at what cost? The people of Nova Prime had lost so much. Families, friends, soldiers. They were all gone. Their city, their home, was reduced to ashes. But despite the devastation, there was a glimmer of hope. The war was over. Humanity had won. Reyna turned to Max, who stood beside her, his face tired but relieved. "We did it," Max said quietly, his voice still carrying the weight of everything they had been through. Reyna nodded, but her expression was grave. "We won, but at what cost? This victory doesn't erase the pain, the loss. The city is gone. We're all that's left." Max's gaze softened. "We've lost a lot, but we're still here, and we're not alone. The survivors, the people who fought with us, they're still here. We'll rebuild, together." Reyna looked at the people around them. There were still survivors, scattered across the wreckage, tending to the wounded and clearing the debris. They were tired, some were injured, but they were alive. The hope of humanity was still alive. In the days that followed, the people of Nova Prime began the long process of rebuilding. The destruction was massive, but Reyna was determined. The city might have fallen, but humanity had survived. And that was more than enough to rebuild on. Reyna led her people with strength and resolve. The days were long, filled with the grueling work of clearing rubble and salvaging what was left of the city. But the nights were filled with something else, a quiet determination to rebuild, to start again. Max, along with the engineers and scientists, worked on restoring power to the city's grid, while others tended to the wounded and provided medical aid. Every task, no matter how small, was a step forward. It wasn't easy. The wounds of war were deep, and the scars would remain for years to come. But the people of Nova Prime had been tested in the fire, and they had come out stronger. They had survived the impossible. They had faced the Xeric and emerged victorious. One afternoon, as Reyna stood among the ruins of the city, a group of survivors approached her. Their faces were tired, but they carried an air of hope that had been missing before. "Commander Reyna," one of them said, stepping forward, "we've heard news. The other human colonies are safe. The Xeric forces are gone from the galaxy." Reyna's heart lifted at the news. The fight had been brutal, but it hadn't been in vain. They had saved more than just their city. They had saved humanity. "Thank you," Reyna said softly. "But this isn't just my victory. It's everyone's. We fought together, and together we'll rebuild." Weeks turned into months, and slowly, Nova Prime began to rise from the ashes. New buildings were constructed, and life began to return to the once dead city. The survivors formed a new community, bound together by their shared struggle. They were no longer just people who had survived a war. They were the future of humanity. Reyna continued to lead with unwavering strength. She knew the road ahead would be long, and the scars of war would never fully heal. But she also knew that the spirit of humanity was unbreakable. As she stood at the highest point of Nova Prime, looking down at the city that was slowly coming back to life, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It was a new dawn. The war was over, and humanity had triumphed. But now, the real work began. Reyna smiled faintly as the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the city. The Zerak were gone. The battles had been fought, and humanity had won. Reyna took a deep breath. She had lost so much, but she had gained something even more precious: the future. As the first rays of the sun touched the ruins of Nova Prime, she knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Humanity had faced the unbeatable enemy and had emerged victorious. Now, it was time to rebuild. And Reyna would lead them into a new era, one where they would never forget the cost of victory, and never forget the strength that made them unbeatable.